The newest prehistoric park was coming along nicely. Though in scope, it was of course a lot smaller than the main safari and zoo, it still had its share of fans that wanted to see these exotic animals. It did the higher-ups good, knowing that there was an interest with prehistoric creatures that were not necessarily only dinosaurs. Recently, another handful of new creature discoveries were made that were now able to be manufactured, so there was a bright future to be had for sure. With the addition of the Kelenken, a golden oldie was brought back in, and despite the familiarity, people flew in from all across the world to see it in a habitat that was more to its own. The newest and most anticipated creature to see the light of day, however, was the famous Dodo. It was incredible to think that such a small creature could shoulder so much fame and popularity. Now granted, it wasn't necessarily popular because it was so awe-inspiring, but many people still felt a connection with the dodo since they went, all things considered, extinct only recently, within the last 300 years, rather than thousands and thousands of years ago. No, it was indeed not their design or looks, because if one were to focus in on that, it could become quite clear why they went extinct and why they probably did not have a big chance to survive throughout the ages even if the human race had not interfered. They were small, jitterish, and were not able to fly. Even with birds today that are at a big disadvantage on land, like penguins, they excel in gaining incredible speeds when entering the water. The dodo, on the other hand, did not have any of that. If it was attacked, it could not fly away, it could not swim away, and most likely, it would try and run away. But its legs were also not built for speed, and a scenario where a dodo would escape with its life, let alone be victorious in a confrontation, was highly unlikely. Yet in this park, they of course had nothing to fear, and since the birds were so small, a lot could be flown over to showcase how social of a species they were. They were so small in fact, that yet again it was an animal that could easily hide themselves in the tall grass. But in this case, the quantity assured the visitors a good glimpse of at least one dodo to be had. One thing that was peculiar was that the dodo was a fairly quiet bird species when compared to other grouping species like geese or penguins. If one were to look at those animals, there would be constant ear-deafening noise as the individual birds would let their position and mood be known to one another. It was their way to find relatives within that large pack of cluttered feathered creatures. But the dodo did not have this, indicating that there might be different mechanisms on how they communicated or would inform the others of their position, mood, or potential predator threat. Now that the dodos had been properly introduced to the visitors, it was time to move on to the next creature. But before that, some adjustments to the park facilities would need to be made. More land would have to be excavated for the new animal zones, and they wanted to erect a giant research and information center with all sorts of exhibits near the shore. It would also be here where multiple luxurious hotels would be built where the guests would have a gorgeous view over the park itself. Now, to appeal to its stay, some really impressive animals would be put next to the hotel as well. Guests would not have a great start of the day if they woke up and saw a giant centipede or toad in front of their hotel when they looked out from their balcony. Something large and majestic would need to be added, so the newest animals to grace the park was the Paraceratherium, another creature that had already been shown to the world before. Though this gentle giant had already been introduced in the main dinosaur zoo, its incredible display still left people in utter awe. It was so much bigger than something like a modern elephant, demanding respect from anyone looking up at it from up close or down from the balconies of the hotel. Multiple of these enormous beasts would be flown over, and the migration was always a massive operation. In this case, also literally. There was always some anxiety, since if something were to go wrong during the movement of an animal of this size, there could be a chance it turned into a frantic panic and start rampaging all over. Luckily for most creatures in this particular zoo, they were not of the size to where they could easily trample the visitors, except these massive herbivores. The same caution was used for the sedating process, but luckily, all of the steps and stages went without any hiccups, demanding a lot of media attention once more when the people saw these creatures fly over their heads. It was still a sight that awed people beyond belief. They moved slow and gentle, with some elegance even, making it indeed the perfect poster child for being near the new hotel facility area. The zone for the Paraceratherium that was reserved was also massive, and could, on paper, even house more animal species if this zone were to be a kind of safari mixed zone. But that would all come in due time, and for now, these giants that were related to the modern day rhino needed to be initiated. Despite being fairly close to the Kelenken, they had nothing to fear because of their sheer size, and the animals were all at ease. It was also a massive contrast with the small and jittery Dodos, and seeing on how gentle both creatures were, there were those suggesting to maybe put both the Dodo and the Paraceratherium in the same area. But there lay some serious danger for the Dodos to be stepped on, since they were so small that their bigger roommates could not properly see them. With another success underway with these giant herbivores, the steam train just kept on rolling to introduce yet another new creature. Though new was yet again a bit too quick to conclude, since the Dimetrodon would be next. This was the first animal to be brought over to the main zoo, but of course belonged in a park where dinosaurs did not roam. By having them already in the main zoo, the scientists knew a lot regarding their behavior and personalities. Though they might look a bit menacing, their movements were very slow due to their horizontal build. Their legs were not as lean and agile as something like a lizard. They would depend on speed by swimming in shallow waters, and back in their time, they were considered an apex, meaning that the limited movement they had on land did not prove to be an issue. They would feed on smaller fish, reptiles, and amphibians, so plenty of those would be added to the scenery as well. It created some more bustling life within their zone already. One of the things that was still so beautiful about the Dimetrodons were their bright and varied color palettes. Though the main zoo definitely had plenty of exotic, colorful species, this zoo yet had to have such a creature, and thus the Dimetrodon almost functioned as the colorful parrots of the prehistoric park. It was mainly this exotic look that still made them very popular, despite the guests being familiar with them for several years already. And then the next creature already lay in wait to be introduced, and this one would be a creature that would send shivers along the spines on those hating bugs and other creepy crawlers. As mentioned before, the park's higher-ups wanted to create a corner full of these creepy crawlers and scarier looking animals, and thus the next insect that would be brought in was the Arthropleura, the giant centipedes.